अपने फैकल्टी मेंबर्स जो हमारे एफिलिएटेड एसोसिएटेड कॉलेजेस में हैं उनको इनवाइट किया है और एज ऑडियंस, और रिसर्च स्कॉलर्स हैं जो विश्वविद्यालय के अलग अलग संस्थानों में अपने शोध कर रहे हैं। आज हमारे साथ डॉक्टर विवेक सर होंगे। मैं अपने उद्यमिता के एसोसिएट डीन महोदय डॉक्टर प्रदीप कुमार सर से निवेदन करूंगा कि वो उनका स्वागत उद्बोधन करें। उसके पश्चात हमारे पास सर का एक साइटेशन है जो हम अपने सभी फैकल्टी मेंबर्स, रिसर्च स्कॉलर्स के साथ साझा करेंगे और ये भी बताएंगे कि सर आज किस थीम पे बात करने वाले हैं। मैं निवेदन करूंगा डॉक्टर प्रदीप कुमार सर से कि वो इस कार्यक्रम में स्वागत उद्बोधन करें। प्लीज सर।
धन्यवाद। Thank you, Abhishek ji. And on the behalf of AKTU, as an associate dean, I welcome Professor Vivek Kumar Singh and all the participants that as we have seen the previous lectures, all the participants attended all the lectures in a very energetic way. And in this series, Dr. Vivek Singh is going to present a scientific research in metric and visibility in today's lecture. As we know that Dr. Singh is an eminent researcher and a teacher. So I welcome, on the behalf of AKTU, I welcome Dr. Vivek Singh and all the participants. And for the citation, I invite Abhishek ji. Please read the citation of sir.
So, Dr. Vivek Kumar Singh is a professor and head of Department of Computer Science at Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. He has more than 15 years of teaching experience in computer science, having taught courses at all levels, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral courses. He is active in research and has worked on several international research projects, including with Germany and Mexico, published about 100 research papers, supervised 7 doctoral theses, and is on reviewing the board member more than top 10 10-tier SCIC indexed international journals. He is a senior member of IEEE, ACM, and life member of CSI, IETE, and ISSI. He is also member of several expert committee of Department of Science and Technology, including member of thematic group on research on the new Science, Technology and Innovation Policy STIP 2020. Sir, today you are cordially invited in our lecture series, and today's lecture will be in 2 parts. First one will be the what are the commonly used metrics and measuring scientific research, and other part what can be done by individuals and institutions to improve the academic visibility. Sir, you are cordially invited. Please continue. Dr. Vivek, sir.
Thank you, Abhishek ji. So, as Abhishek has briefed, the talk would be on scientific research, looking at 2 main aspects. One of them is the popular metrics that we often come across in research. And the second is, can there be some strategies that we can follow so that our academic visibility is improved? So two different aspects, they are also related in a way that unless we know the metrics, we can't, take steps to improve our academic visibility. And metrics, whether we like it or not, they are going to stay. Performance evaluation, research evaluation is going to stay. And in the time to come, taking into account the kind of R&D system and the kind of policies that are being introduced in higher education and technical education, metrics are definitely going to be there. So it's better that, we are educated about them and we are well aware of these metrics. And, not all of them, there are a lot of metrics. I have been working on these metrics and ranking and these kind of things for last, at least 5-6 years, doing some original work as well. So what we need to know is that there are a lot, we often come across impact factor of a journal. We often come across H index of a researcher. We often come across I-10 index of a researcher. Then we have site score of a journal, impact factor of a journal. So there are so many indices, so many metrics, and there are many actually. Not all of them are equally popular. So we will go through some metrics, and then can what are the things that we should do so that whatever research that we produce, whatever knowledge output that we produce, it is visible to a wider audience. So this is a question of visibility. This is a question of dissemination and reach. Uh, I remember, at some point of time, I was talking to one of my senior colleagues and I asked, right in the beginning of my career, what should be the duties of a teacher? And what I was told is that, a teacher is supposed to do at least three things: creation of knowledge, dissemination of knowledge, and application of knowledge. So creation of knowledge largely maps to the research activities that we do where we produce original knowledge. And dissemination of knowledge means we have to disseminate it to a wider audience, to the broader society, to a larger section. And application is when we apply whatever knowledge that we have produced to solve societal problems. So a teacher is supposed to do all these three things: create knowledge, disseminate this knowledge, and apply the knowledge. Okay. So when we look at the metrics and visibility part, I'm going to talk about when you create the knowledge, why you should also be interested in properly disseminating it to a wider audience. And what is it that we can do? For example, many times we publish in a journal and this journal is behind a paywall. So journal, your paper becomes, it's not freely accessible. But there are strategies that we can adopt that can make this paper widely accessible, irrespective of the fact that it is appearing in a journal which is behind a paywall. So this is largely that I would be talking about. I'm sharing my screen in full screen. So this is on scientific research, metrics, and visibility. So two parts, that is how the lecture has been organized. One would be talking about, the metrics part, where we say what are the metrics. And the second part is where we talk about the academic visibility part. Okay. So first one, we look at what is the need for this kind of assessment, what are the popular metrics, and when we compute these metrics, what are the scholarly databases from which we derive the data. Okay. So this is on scholarly database. Then the second part, we would be talking about some academic social networks. We would be talking about scientific social responsibility. We would be talking about institutional repositories and disciplinary repositories that we can use in order to disseminate our work. Now let's look at the broader context. Why all this has become important? Well, if we look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030, what we see is there are a number of things. We are expected to have no poverty by 2030, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, clean water, affordable clean energy. Now, if we try to summarize, all these goals together, what we have is most of these goals essentially they need strong scientific research. Okay. So in order to reduce poverty, we need to improve our grain production. In order to achieve zero hunger, we need to have a proper scientific-based distribution system. Okay, good health and well-being again is research-oriented. So most of these are highly research-oriented. Clean energy, we need a lot of research in. So a lot of research activities would be required if we want to achieve these development goals. And when we say a lot of research activities are required, of course, funding would also be needed. But most of the funding programs, they actually are very selective in funding research. And when they fund the research, they often come across different kind of evaluations. So if there are applications from individuals, from universities, what they do is they look at the different metric in the proposal. They look at what is the H index of the PI, what is the H index of the institution, and what is the overall academic reputation of the institution. So there are a lot of things that they look at. Okay. So we must be aware of what are the metrics that they look at. Now, when we talk about scientific research, well, scientific research, generally people only look at the output side. Okay. Most of the people, they only focus on the output side. Okay. But scientific research must be looked in totality. So we cannot produce publications, we cannot produce patents, we cannot produce clinical trials, innovative products unless we have a workforce, unless we have institutions where people can work. Okay. So that is where I would say that, if you want to understand the scientific system, scientific and research ecosystem in India, we must understand inputs. We must look at the enabling ecosystem. What is the overall enabling ecosystem? And then we look at what is the output that is produced. What are the inputs? Well, researchers, we call them as full-time equivalents. Then we need money. So we often measure this money in terms of GERD. We call it gross expenditure on research and development. This is often measured in terms of percentage of GDP. So we say, okay, for that matter, if we say India, what amount of its GDP India spends on research and development activities? So we call that as GERD. Then we have different kind of grants, performance based or otherwise, which are essential for carrying out research. And of course, one more equally important thing is access to the knowledge. So we cannot carry out research unless we have access to the knowledge which has already been created. That means we should have access to digital libraries, we should have access to journals, we should have access to databases and so on. So that is a primary component. So on the input side, we have researchers, we need money, we need grants, and we need access to knowledge. Now, what is the enabling ecosystem? We need labs. Okay, we need the overall ecosystem where we can carry out the research. And what is the output of this research? We have research publications, patents, clinical trials, innovative products, and so on. So that is where, when we talk about scientific research, we should always look into the whole spectrum of scientific research, not only looking at what is the total output that we produce, but we should also look at the output produced vis-a-vis the input that goes into the system, vis-a-vis the overall environment in which we operate. Okay. So simply saying that India doesn't produce enough research is not appropriate. What we need to produce, what we need to evaluate is what is the total amount of people who are involved in research and development activities in India, and then we look at what is the research output. Okay. But largely, most of the metrics are output oriented. So most of the metrics that actually evaluate research, they are at the moment, currently, they are more focused on outputs. They focus more on counting publications, counting patents, counting citations, and so on. Okay. So what are the metrics and what is the need for metrics? Okay. So well, metrics are used to measure. So metrics are there in different disciplines, not only in measuring the research, but even in software engineering, we talk about software metrics. Even in order to measure weight of a quantity, we say 1 kg. So 1 kg is a metric. So similarly, we have different metrics in measurement of research activity as well. For example, we say GERD, we say full-time equivalent, how many people are actually involved, what are the grants, what is the published output, and so on. Okay. And why do we need metrics in research? Because we need to measure different kind of impacts. We need to measure impact of the author, we need to measure impact of the institution, we need to measure impact of a journal, and similarly, funding agencies who are funding research, they need to know what is the overall impact of the funding that they have given to a particular institution or an individual. So they need to measure. So metrics are essential for measuring overall performance of research and development activities. And these measured indicators, at the moment, there are generally two kinds: size dependent and size independent. Okay. Now, what is size dependent? For example, if I say the total research output of Banaras Hindu University is X, and I compare it with the total research output with a small ICER, let's say ICER Pune, I think this would be an unfair comparison because Banaras Hindu University has more than 2,000 researchers. ICER Pune may have less than 100 people. So comparing the total research output of Banaras Hindu University with ICER would not be a good idea because the total output is a size dependent parameter. So if there are more researchers, the output produced by the two institutions would be different. So for some metric, for example, the total number of research papers that are produced, it is dependent on the size of the institution, number of people who are working in an institution. And the second one is size independent metric, which is independent. So when we say independent, we must be doing some kind of normalization. So for example, we can say, what is the publication per capita of Banaras Hindu University and ICER Pune? Now, when I say publication per capita, then I am dividing the total publications with the number of people who are working in Banaras Hindu University and ICER Pune. So this is now size independent because I have normalized it by the number of faculty members who are actually involved in research and development activities. So then we can say, okay, what is the productivity per capita? Well, different institutions, as we are aware, there are different kind of ranking systems. Okay, the three most popular ones are ARWU, we have QS, we have the. So these are, one of the three most popular international ranking schemes. So this one is by Shanghai Jiaotong University, Academic Ranking of World University. This is Quackrelli Simons, QS, and this is Times Higher Education ranking. So initially QS and DA were together, but after some time QS and DA have separated. I think around 2014, we have two independent rankings. QS is separate, DA is separate. Now, if you look at the number of Indian institutions ranked, in ARWU 2019, only 11 Indian institutions are ranked. If we look at QS 2019, only 24 institutions are ranked. If we look at the 2019, only 49 are ranked. Out of how much? So the ranks 1,258, but only 49 from India figure. QS ranks 1,000, but only 24 from India figure. ARW ranks 1,000, but only 11 from India figure in that. So as a result, these international rankings, howsoever good they are not that much informative about Indian institutions. Because in India, we have more than 900 universities. We have more than 35,000 colleges. But out of this 935,000 colleges, only 11, 24 or 49. So only 50 Indian institutions are ranked by the top ranking systems. And that is why we also need national rankings. And as you may have seen, NIRF has started since 2016-17. And NIRF is an overall institutional ranking framework. And the idea was that if the international rankings fail to capture a broad number of Indian institutions, why can't we have a national ranking system? Okay? And this can help in a number of ways, including in performance-based funding. Okay? So performance-based funding is a very important thing that one should be looking at. Okay? Now this is ARWU. I'm quickly going through this. ARWU is 2009 onwards. It was Shanghai Ranking Consultancy. 2003 to 8, it was known as Shanghai Jiaotong. It was done by that. Initially, it ranked 500 institutions. Now it is ranking 1,000 institutions. The 2018 rankings, well, they have these parameters: quality of education, quality of faculty, research output, and per capita performance. Okay. So per capita performance is a size independent thing. The rest of them are size dependent. Okay. And as you can see, at least quality of education and quality of faculty is not very much relevant for India because we don't have enough number of universities which produce Nobel laureates or field medalists. Okay. So we need to figure and we need to do, some other parameters and rank based on those parameters. And as we can see, the general overall ranking for 2018 is Harvard, Stanford, and University of Cambridge. Well, ARWU also does a subject-wise ranking that they have recently started, and they do it in different subjects. And these rankings often vary by subject. For example, the Shanghai ranking, you can see this is for mathematics. So this is for mathematics. And mathematics, Princeton is at top, University of Paris South is at second. If we look at economics, well, this changes. So in economics, Harvard is at top, University of Chicago at second, and so on. So with different subjects, the rankings of the universities change. So that at least tells us one important thing, that not all universities are good in all areas. So every university has strength in one particular thing. So there may be an institution which is good in computer science. There may be an institution which is very good in material science. There may be a university which is very good in biological science. So different universities have different strengths. This is the ranking. Now it uses 13 parameters, as you can see here: research income from industry, international diversity, how many teachers are international, how many students are international, what is the teaching learning environment. So this is a lot of reputation surveys are there. Then we have research volume, income and reputation, citations, and so on. So there are different parameters that the ranking uses. And they have also recently started filtering by subjects. Similarly, we have another ranking called QS ranking, and QS started in 2004. Initially, QS and DA was a single ranking. Since 2010, it is independent ranking, and it uses 6 metrics. Okay, so it is using 6 metrics, and these are these 6 metrics. Again, reputation surveys are involved: academic reputation, employer reputation. So unlike academic ranking of world universities, QS and DA, they use reputation based surveys. Okay. Now again, in this case, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, standard top. So the point that I want to convey here is the kind of parameters that these top international rankings use, they are not fit for Indian institutions. Number one. Number two, not many Indian institutions figure in these international rankings. So we need to have our own ranking systems, and that is why we have started this. Okay. So what popular ranking systems fail to capture? Well, institutions in developed countries, our developing countries are poorly represented. As you could see, only 50 institutions are represented in the, as compared to the 900 universities that we have and 35,000 colleges that we have. And number two, the top centers of research excellence in a particular area, they could not be captured by the international rankings. For example, if I want to know what is the top university in nanotechnology, the international rankings don't answer this. Okay. And number three, the subject classification scheme that they use, this is based on source of publication. So they say that they don't really look at the article content when they want to find out whether something is AI, whether something is computer science, whether something is biological science, but they look at the journal in which it has been published, which itself is flawed. And there are many other things. Now, if we want to have our own evaluations, if we want to have our own impact systems, our own national rankings, what is it that we need to do? Well, there are a lot of direct and computed indicators that are there. Some of them are size dependent. For example, TP. TP stands for total papers produced by an individual or an institution. TC is total citations. ICP is internationally collaborated papers, and high CP is highly cited papers. And if we normalize it, then we can say publications per capita, or we can say citations per paper. Okay. For example, if I produce 10,000 papers, but they are not cited, then we can say we are not very good in terms of quality. We may be good in quantity, but we are not very good in quality. Okay. So we would be good in quality if we also get good number of citations. Okay. Then we have different kind of impact indices. Okay. So for authors, we have H index, G index, H index, P index. For journals, we have impact factor, SNP, site score, and so on. We would be talking about some of them. And then we have different kind of proxies. For example, we have proxy for citations, we have proxy for composite measures are there, normalizations are there. We have something called field weighted citation index and so on. So there are different kind of measures that are there. Now let's look at one of them. Now this is something that many people talk about, impact factor. Now what is impact factor? Impact factor is a proprietary trademark measure that is computed by Web of Science, which is now owned by Clarivate Analytics. Okay. And how do we compute impact factor of a journal? Well, impact factor of a journal is computed for a 2-year publication period. So what we do is, what we do essentially is this. We say that look at year 2017. So if I want to compute the impact factor of this journal in 2017, what I would do, I would look at what is the total number of sites in 2017 that papers published during 2016 got. What is the sites in 2017 that papers published in 2015? So what is it that we are doing? We are looking at a particular year and we are looking at the 2 previous years. So we are saying, okay, if I want to compute impact factor in 2017, let's look at the papers published in 2016. Let's look at the papers published in 2015 and count the number of citations that papers published in 2015 got in the 2017, that papers published in 2016 got in the year 2017, and sum them together. So I am doing sum of the total citations that a journal gets in the year 2017 for the papers published in the 2 previous years. So this is my numerator. And then what I do is I divide it by the total number of papers published during 2016 and published during 2015. So let's say that during 2016, the papers published in during 2017, the papers published in 15 and 16 got 641 citations. And the total number of papers published during this period was 451. So what I do is I divide 641 by 451 and I come across this number 1.421, and this is my impact factor. So what is impact factor of this journal? Impact factor of this journal in 2017 is 1.421. Okay. How do we compute? For a particular year, look at the publications in the 2 previous years, look at the citations that they got in the current year, sum them and then divide by the total number of papers published in the 2 previous years. And that is how we have a normalized measure which is known as impact factor. So when would be the impact factor high? The impact factor if the numerator is high or if the denominator is low. Okay. So the impact factor would be high if the numerator is high. So numerator is high if the number of citations is high. So if a journal publishes many papers, it will have a high number of papers. So denominator would be high. All the papers taken together should be getting enough number of citations. Only then the impact factor would be high, because I am dividing the total citations by the total number of papers published. So this is how we compute impact factor of a journal. And as you may already be aware, impact factors keep on changing. So every year the impact factor changes. Okay. Now these are impact factors. So as you can see here, the top ones are like 244.8585. So what does it mean? This means that any paper published in this journal number 1 on an average gets 244 citations. This is not true, but this is how we average it. Okay. Then the second measure that we come across is H index. Now H index, impact factor is a measure of a journal, whereas H index is a measure of an individual. Okay. So when we want to measure the quality of a researcher, and this has also been extended to evaluate quality of an institution or a quality of a journal as well. So what we do is we have a measure called H index. Okay. What we do is we say a scholar with an index of H has published H papers, each of which has been cited in other papers at least H times. And we are looking at the highest value of H. Country, anything. And the best part is H index is a good measure in the sense that it tries to capture both. It tries to capture quantity as well as quality. Okay. Now this is an example. Suppose I have author 1. Suppose I have author 2. Suppose I have author 3. Author 1 has first paper which is cited 260 times, second is cited 134 times, third is cited 102 times, and so on. Now what we can see is the H index for this person would be how much? The H index for this person would be 6. Because there are only 6 papers which are cited more than 6 times. So irrespective of the fact that this person has a paper which is cited more than 260 times, 134 times, this person will have an H index of 6. So highest H, where all these H papers are cited at least H times. Okay. We cannot say H index is 7 because the 7th paper is not cited 7 times. Similarly, look at author 2. First paper is cited 55 times, second is 32, and so on. And look here, the 9th paper is cited 9 times. Now this person only has 9 papers and all of them are cited 9 times or more. So we say that the H index of this person is 9 because this is the largest H. And look at the third author. Now here, this author has only 6 papers. Now each paper is cited at least 250 times. Look at this author. Very few publications but very high citations. First paper is published 5,000 times, cited 5,000 times. Second is cited 3,200 times, and so on. But the H index still remains as 6. So now compare author 1 with author 3. Whom would you consider a better quality of researcher? Well, of course, most of you will say that author 3 is a better researcher because he published only few papers and they are very highly cited. So author 3 is a highly cited researcher, but the H index is 6. Whereas author 1 has published 12 and his H index is also 6. Author 2, who published only 9 with lesser number of overall citations, has an H index of 9. So why this is happening? Because H index is a measure which tries to combine quantity with quality. Okay. So our individual would have high H index if he's doing both, if he's publishing more and if his citations are more. Okay. So this is what is known as H index. Now there are about 3,160 people in the world who have H index more than 100. So as per Google Scholar. So that means all of them have at least 100 papers which are cited more than 100 times. Then we have two other measures, I-10 and I-20. They are very simple. They are linear counting methods. I-10 is a simple count. It says number of papers which are cited 10 or more times. Okay. So if I publish 100 papers, but only 30 papers are cited 10 times or more, my I-10 index would be 30. Okay. So what does it mean? I-10 index refers to the total number of papers which are cited at least 10 times. Similarly, I-20 refers to the total number of papers which are cited at least 20 times. Okay. And these are also author impact metrics. Okay. Again, this one is a combination of quantity and quality both. Because if I publish only 5 papers, then my I-10 index cannot be more than 5. Okay, just like H index. Now, Google Scholar is a thing which automatically gives you some of these computations. For example, it automatically gives you H index. It automatically gives you I-10 index. Now, when we compute this I-10 index, H index, I-20 index, where do we get this data? Because you may have seen that your own H index in Web of Science is something, in Scopus it is something else, in Google Scholar it is something else, in Dimensions it may be something else. Okay. So where do we get the research publication data from? So now what happens when we publish a paper, we may be publishing in journal X or in journal Y or in journal Z. Now different scholarly databases index different amount of journals. Now Web of Science is the oldest one, created in 1964 and continues to be the most selective database. Scopus is a newer one, created in 2014, 2004, and it indexes much more as compared to Web of Science. Google Scholar again created in 2004, and it does not index journals directly, but it indexes papers directly. Okay, so it uses a different approach. Dimensions is a new one created in 2018, which indexes journals. So if you want to compute H index or I10 index or I20 index, you have to take data for either an individual or institution or a department from any of these databases. Okay. Out of this, only Google Scholar is free. Web of Science and Scopus, they are subscription based. Now let's look at Web of Science. Web of Science, created in 1964, it has about 20,000 plus journals indexed. And there are 3 citation indexes that it mainly has, other than the book citation index. These are called Science Citation Index, which is now known as SCIE, Science Citation Index Expanded. Then we have Social Science Citation Index and Arts and Humanities Citation Index. And they have publication records from 1900 onwards. Now, core collection only contains 12,000 journals. Okay, so core collection means only these 3. There is a new index that they have created, which is called ESCI, Emerging Science Citation Index, which indexes more journals. But impact factor is not calculated for them. Impact factor is calculated only for journals which are indexed in SCI or SSCI or ASCI. All these 3 taken together, they are known as Web of Science core collection. Then we have Scopus, created in 2004, and it indexes about 39,000 journals. So almost double to what Web of Science indexes. Okay, and it has records from 1996 onwards. Okay. Then we have Google Scholar. Well, Google Scholar created in 2004, and unlike Web of Science and Scopus, it is not a curated database. What does it mean? That it is not manually curated. So Web of Science and Scopus, they source their data directly from the publisher. The data is manually fed. Okay, but Google Scholar doesn't do this. Google Scholar uses a web crawler to collect data from the World Wide Web. Okay, and how does it recognize what is a research paper or what is not? Now, what Google Scholar does is that any article, any piece of electronic document which gets citations from academic articles would be treated as an academic article. And that is how Google Scholar often classifies lecture notes, presentation slides also as academic articles, research articles, which is not actually correct. But because the kind of strategy that Google Scholar uses, they use this kind of system. Okay, so they use a web search for documents. Now Google Scholar has a higher coverage, but because of the approach that they use, they have issues of reliability and quality, which is not there in Web of Science and Scopus. But of course, it is a popular database and it is free to use. Okay. So what we can say in practical terms is that Web of Science is most selective, Scopus has a wider coverage, and Google Scholar has a very wide coverage. So as a result, if you look for your H index in Google Scholar, Web of Science and Scopus, in Web of Science it may be lesser, Scopus it may be more, and in Google Scholar it may be further more. Okay. Now, one important thing that I want to highlight very quickly is that these scholarly databases can not only be used for evaluating these metrics, but they can also be used by researchers to look for research articles, to search for research articles. And if they use Web of Science or Scopus or Google Scholar, then the search would be limited only within the scholarly article domain. So the result would only be scholarly article. We don't get other web pages which are not scholarly articles as results. Okay, so this is an advantage. If I limit my search to Web of Science, I will only get results from journals which are indexed in Web of Science. If I limit it to Scopus, I will only get results which are published in Scopus. So I can get research papers. Now, how do I get it? So this is like, a search engine which is helping us in getting it. Now, what do you do when you traditionally do web search? Well, you have an information need, you specify a query, and this query is matched with some document terms through an index, and then we get some results shown in some ranked order. How many pages we see? Very limited number of pages, maybe 1 page, 2 page, or 3 page. And what happens in practice? Well, in practice, this is what user sees, and this is what happens in the background. We have web crawler, document collection, inverted index, and then the retrieval and ranking is looking at this inverted index, and that is how results are reproduced. And we have ranking functions like PageRank and so on, which are used for ranking the results. Now, my point is, when we do this kind of web search, we often ignore many important information that are available. For example, in a scholarly article domain, we know that what is title of a paper, what are the keywords, what is the abstract, what are the references. Then we also have some bibliometric information. For example, how many times this paper has been cited, which is the institution where it has been published, and so on. So all this information can be useful for a young researcher or for a person who is looking for quality papers. For example, suppose you want to have a query like this. I want to find out best papers, the most cited papers, let's say in deep learning. Well, if you do Google search, you don't get results, the proper results. But if you do a Web of Science search or a Scopus search, you can get the most cited papers on deep learning. Okay. How do you get it? This is how you do Google Scholar. Just say scholar.google.com, you type it and you get results. And when you get results, you also get some more data. How many times it has been cited. Okay. And you also get alternate source. So if this paper is available at some place free of cost, free of, without any access barrier, then you have this available. Similarly, you can also search by person name. And similarly, a similar thing is available in Web of Science. In Web of Science core collection, I can do a basic search. So I can say, I can type something and I can get results. Or I can do an advanced search. I can say, okay, I want nanotube, carbon nanotube, where papers are written by this particular person. So I can do all these searches and I would get results like that. Or I can also get search by organization. For example, if I'm interested in looking at all papers published by Banaras Hindu University, I can say OG is equal Banaras Hindu University and I will get results. Now, when I get results of this kind. I get what is the total number of results, what is the number of results by publication year, how many of them are open access, how many of them are by publication type, and then I have different sorting parameter. Sort by date, sort by time cited, sort by users count, sort by relevance. So if you have subscription to Web of Science, which Indian universities have by means of INDEST or some kind of consortium membership. So most of the government funded institutions already have access to Web of Science. So you simply need to check with your library whether you have access or not. So if you have access, you can do a Web of Science search and you would be presented with results from journals which are indexed in Web of Science. So as a result, you don't have to bother about the fact whether the results that I'm looking at, it is only quality or not. Okay. And if you click on a paper, okay, if you click on one particular paper, you are shown a result of this kind. Paper, authors, volume, issue, published, author information, how many times it has been cited, how many references it has, how many times it has been downloaded, and so on. So a lot of information is available from Web of Science about papers that you search for, which is not available if you do normal Google search. A similar feature is also available in Scopus. In Scopus, you can look for a particular document. You can search for authors. You can search by affiliation, or you can do an advanced search just like what you do in Web of Science. So we can search by author last name, affiliation, author first name. We can search by advanced, where we can issue queries like this. Give me all results where cognitive architectures are there, where the author name is this, where title is complaints this, where publication is after this, volume is this, author is this, and title is this. So this is what we can do.
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है.
Okay. Or I can search by affiliation. So there are multiple ways that we can search. And again, when you search on Scopus, you have results of this kind, where you can limit by year, by author name, by by number of things. Okay. And you click on one paper, you get this kind of paper detail. So these are some databases that are used for getting data from for a particular country, or for a particular individual, or for a particular department or institution. Now just quickly showing you some more data. This is on Indian research output rank. Well, India, in terms of total published research output, if I look at year 2018, now NSF data says it is ranked 3. The Scopus says India is ranked 5, and Web of Science says it is ranked 9. Okay. So different databases, I am showing this figure just to highlight the fact that if you change the database, your rank will change, your H index will change, because all these databases index different amount of journals, different amount of papers. So I picked up 3 databases for India. Now Web of Science, Scopus, and Dimensions. Web of Science, this is 2014 to 18 period. India is number 10. In Scopus, it is number 5 by number of papers. In Dimensions, it is number 7. So different databases show a country at different places. In terms of proportionate share to the global research output, India by Web of Science, by Scopus is 5.52% of the global research output. By WS, it is 3.7% of the research output, and by Dimensions, it is 3.07% of the total research output. So as the database changes, the global shares also change for a country, and similarly, it will change for a particular individual or institution. Well, fortunately, India is doing much better in computer science. So as per Scopus database, our overall contribution in 2018 is close to 10% of the total global papers. As compared to, so overall we are 5%, but in computer science, we are contributing about 10% of the global research output. And we are contributing largely in AI, computer networks, computer software and applications, and so on. Well, I think I will skip a part here because there are, I will directly go to the visibility part. Let's talk about academic visibility part. So given the fact that I may be doing a lot of research, but what happens if my research is not visible widely? Then my research is not useful. So can I do something so that my research is visible to a wider number of people? So this is what we can do. There are some strategies that we can follow to improve our academic visibility. Well, what is it that we should do? Number one, we have to resort to internet. So internet in current world, people are looking at internet for all kind of information, including research articles. So the days of going to a library for a research article are gone. We now search on internet for a research article. Now, if you look at internet, about 7.5 billion people across the world is the world population. Out of that, about 4.02 billion use internet. So that means about 53% of the world population use internet. Well, this varies with different countries by regions. For example, Europe has 94% people using internet, whereas South Asia has 36%. So this varies by region. Africa has only 12 out of 100 people having access to internet. Okay. So given the fact that internet is becoming more and more wider, for example, in India itself, in 2014, only 12% of our population had access to internet. In 2018, 36% have access to internet. So we have, in 4 years, we have multiplied 3 times. Okay. So this number may be more than 50% in 2020. So given that, a lot of people are now using internet, what is it that we should do? Well, there are a lot of academic networks and repositories that we can utilize, that we can use in order to have wider dissemination of our research work. First, we can create profile on LinkedIn. Well, LinkedIn is a professional network, but out of many things, it also allows you a wonderful thing, that it allows you to post all your publications. Okay. So you can connect to people, you can do what are the publications that you have. Okay. So one must have a LinkedIn profile if you are in academic circles. Number two, there are some academic social networks. So LinkedIn is a general social network, but there are some specialized academic social networks. Now, three of them are very popular: ResearchGate, Academia, and Mendeley. ResearchGate, for some reason, is very popular in India, and ResearchGate is a wonderful network, which is an academic social network, which has both kind of features. It is basically an academic network, and it is also a social network. So what does ResearchGate allows? ResearchGate allows you to create a profile. It allows you to post your publications. It shows you a lot of data, how many people have read your paper, how many people have cited your paper, and so on. And it also allows you to post full text of your paper. So if you have the copyright of publishing your preprint or your postprint, you don't have to create a website. You only create a ResearchGate profile and you can post your paper. And the best part is ResearchGate is browsable and visible by web search engines. So if you have a ResearchGate profile and you don't have a web page, probably your ResearchGate profile will be shown if somebody searches. And if you have a paper and somebody is searching for that paper and you have posted full text of that paper in ResearchGate, that would be visible. So anyone who doesn't have access to the journal in which you have published can access the ResearchGate profile. And the person can access the paper. Similarly, we have academia.edu. So academia.edu is a similar network that ResearchGate is. Mendeley is another similar network. Mendeley has another desktop version that you can use. So out of ResearchGate, Academia, and Mendeley, I would strongly suggest that you should be a member of at least one of them. So you should be, if you are in research and if you are in academic circles, you should be a member of one of them, because that gives you wider academic visibility. This is an Indian version. Vidwan is an Indian database. So if you want visibility in India, this is created by InfluMnet. You can contact them and you can have your membership. Maybe if you have published enough that Scopus and Web of Science have enough number of papers for you, then you may find yourselves automatically indexed in Vidwan, because they take data directly from Scopus and Web of Science as well. Then there's something interesting. You should have your ORCID ID. So Open Researcher is kind of open research identification system, where you have an ORCID ID mapped to each researcher. Okay. So nowadays, when you submit a paper, many times the journals also ask you, what is your ORCID ID? So that your ORCID ID is permanently mapped to the paper once it is accepted. So I would suggest that if you don't have ORCID ID, please get your ORCID ID. It is free to sign. You can easily get, you don't have to pay anything. And if you have your ORCID ID, you can easily get all your publications shown in your ORCID ID. And ORCID IDs can also be linked with your Scopus author ID. So all your publications which are listed in Scopus would automatically be imported by your ORCID profile, and they would be shown in your ORCID page. Okay. Similarly, there's another interesting thing, a new one. It is by Clarivate Analytics, which is Publons. So Publons is another wonderful thing that you should look into. Publons has direct access to Web of Science. So Publons is a platform similar to ORCID, but it allows another important feature, that it also gives you review credit. So what it shows is that other than the number of publications that you have, it also shows you how many papers you have reviewed, for which journals you have reviewed. Okay. So this is a wonderful thing. I would suggest that you should be a member of both ORCID and Publons, and both of them are free to sign up. And I would say something more to do, because we have a scientific social responsibility policy in India, which says that, now this is a draft policy issued in September 2019. It would be part of the new science, technology, innovation policy when it comes up. It basically talks of bridging the science society and science and society science gaps. That whatever science is produced by researchers in India, it should benefit the society. Now, this would benefit the society if we are increasing the interconnect between science and society. And one way of increasing the interconnect between science and society is that whatever research that we produce, we try hard to disseminate it to a wider audience, to general public, by posting it on social media, by posting it on academic social networks, and so on. Because nobody from newspapers or general public is going to read journals, but they can read on social networks. Okay. So it is important that we do this. So out of these four, one of the important things is that we should post our papers on institutional or disciplinary repositories. For example, Government of India has created a National Digital Library Project, NDL, which also includes an institutional repository. So each institution is required to have an institutional repository, which should deposit, where all people working in that institution should deposit papers that they publish. Okay. If they are not authorized to deposit the journal version, they can deposit the preprint version or post-print version. But if your institution doesn't have institutional repositories, then there are some central repositories. Okay. For example, Science Central is a central repository which has 24 IR links and anybody can deposit. Then we have CSIR Central by CSIR, Krishi Kosh is by ICR, and India Archive is a recent setup one, 2019. If you have your paper which you want to showcase to a wider audience, make it freely accessible, a good idea would be to deposit it on India Archive. Okay. Now, Science Central, as I said, it is basically DST, DBT combined, and it is managed by a lab of CSIR. CSIR Central is all the data, all the research output from CSIR is hosted here. And Krishi Kosh, all the research output from ICR system is hosted on ICR. So if you don't get a paper on agriculture science, you can go to Krishi Kosh to look if this paper is available. Okay. And the most popular and the most free one is Archive, which is a project by Cornell University. And what we have is a wonderful thing. It allows you to deposit your e-prints. And the best part is that it has web discoverability. So if you deposit a paper in Archive, then it would appear in search engines. Okay. So if you have a paper which you're going to submit in a journal and you want feedback, okay. So what you can do is you can deposit in Archive. So you will get the copyright that nobody can publish that because your idea is already published in Archive. You can get feedback of a wider audience so that you can improve it and then you can submit it to a journal. Okay. So Archive is a wonderful platform. If you're not using it, you should start using it. The URL for this is archive.org and it has billions of articles. So I would conclude out of the 1 hour time that I had, I would conclude by saying that metrics and evaluations are going to be there. So there is no way that we can run away from them, but what is best is that we educate ourselves and we remain competitive. And number two, knowledge production and dissemination is a key component to prosper in a knowledge-based economy. It is not only important that we produce research papers, but it is equally important that we share them widely, we disseminate them widely. And number three, barrier-free access to knowledge is very important. So barrier-free is going to come if we also take proactive steps in disseminating the knowledge that we create. For example, if we keep on publishing in journals which are behind a paywall, then our papers would not be freely accessible. But even if we publish in journals behind paywall, I can deposit it on Archive and can still make this accessible. So this is all that I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for your patience. I am open for questions.
थैंक यू सो मच सर, काफ़ी नॉलेजेबल सेशन रहा सर आपका, और इसमें हमारे साथ कुछ क्वेश्चंस भी हैं, मैं एक एक करके डिस्कस करना चाहूँगा। डॉक्टर आदित्य भारद्वाज पूछना चाह रहे हैं सर, व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन SCI एंड SC-I? दिस इज द QA in QA box. ये क्वेश्चन है.
Okay. So, well, as far as SCIE and SCI, so there are three things that one should not be confused of. Now, there's something called Web of Science. Okay, Web of Science is a scholarly database. It publishes 4 citation, in fact 5 citation index. They call it SCI. Initially, it was called SCI, Science Citation Index, but in about 10 years back, they expanded it. They expanded its coverage. So they SCI and they call it now SCIE, Science Citation Index Expanded. Okay. So all journals which are publishing in science, they are included. All important journals are included in SCIE. Then we have another one called SSCI. So this is Social Science Citation Index. Then we have another one which is called AHCI, which is Arts Humanity Citation Index. And they have started a new one which is called ESCI, which is called Emerging Science Citation Index. So what is important for us as a researcher is the core collection, SCIE, SSCI and AHCI.
Sir,
No difference
question
between SCI and SCIE now.
Next question is again from Dr. Aditya Bhardwaj. Sir, is ESCI is better than Scopus?
Well, ESCI is completely different. ESCI is a citation index that Web of Science has created. It has no relation with the Scopus. Okay, a journal may be indexed in Scopus. It may also be indexed in Web of Science. It may also be indexed in Google Scholar. All these 3 databases are completely independent. So if a journal is indexed in Web of Science, it does not mean that it will also be indexed in Scopus. If it is indexed in Scopus, it does not mean that it will also be indexed in Web of Science. So ESCI indexing does not carry any weight at the moment, because ESCI is something that Web of Science has created for their internal evaluation. So what happens is, if you are a journal publisher and you want that your journal should be indexed in Web of Science core collection, then you have to apply. And your journal will be monitored for a period of 2-3 years. And when you apply, you would be listed in ESCI. And after an evaluation period of 3 years, you may be moved into the core collection, which is the Science Citation Index. Okay. So ESCI is not used for evaluation purposes. ESCI is only an internal thing that Web of Science has created for monitoring journals for prospective inclusion in their core collection. It has nothing to do with the Scopus.
Sir, next question Ms. Sonali se hai. Good evening, sir. Does it mean that a Google Scholar database is not that authentic as compared to Scopus?
Well, I would agree partially. Google Scholar is not that authentic. It has many errors. It has many reliability issues. The most accurate ones are Web of Science and Scopus because they are manually curated. Somebody who has seen, some person has seen the data, and the data that they get is directly from the publisher. So they get directly from the journal. So they index journals cover to cover. So Google Scholar is using, a web crawler. So as I said, a web crawler has its own limitation. So if you publish a lecture note on your website, Google Scholar may index that as a research paper. If you publish a chapter on website, a lecture note on website, it may be indexed by Google Scholar as a research paper. Even a slide may be indexed as a research paper. Exactly. So there are issues.
Next question, sir. Dr. Aditya Bhardwaj said, sir, can we post our research papers that not downloaded on journal papers? Will it violate journal rules?
Well, yes, we can post research papers. There are some catches to this. When we publish in a journal, we often transfer the copyright. Now, when we transfer the copyright statement mentions number of things. Sometimes it says you can publish the preprint of your paper on your website, on your personal pages, on your institutional repositories. Now, this preprint is the version that you submitted to the journal for review. It is not the final accepted one, but it is the preprint version that you submitted for review. So most of the journals allow that preprint can be hosted on our personal pages, our institutional pages, or our social network pages, and so on. And of course, preprints are quite good if we want to disseminate them. And in the preprint, we can put a notice that the final version of this paper appears in this journal, which is behind this paywall. But nowadays, many journals are allowing that after 1 year embargo period, you can post it free of cost for free access, and sometimes they themselves make it free access. Okay, but preprints and postprints in most of the cases can be posted.
Next question, sir, Saroj Balaji se hai. How can one check that his or paper can be shared on ResearchGate?
Well, you have to check the copyright statement that you have signed. If the copyright statement says that you cannot share, then you cannot share. If the copyright statement says that you can share the preprint, you can share the preprint. So it is mainly the copyright statement that you have to look at.
Mr. Nazia Praveen is asking, how do I find suitable journal for my manuscript? I have tried to use Scopus and other tools for the same, but didn't. Please help. Doesn't help.
Well, nowadays, most of the publishing houses are doing it. So if you go to Springer website, if you go to Elsevier website, if you go to Sage website, now all of them has a journal match tool. So if you type, if you simply copy paste your abstract, or if you simply copy paste your title plus some more information, they would automatically do some machine learning concept extraction, and they would suggest you the possible journals. So I would suggest go for a good publisher. If you go for a good publisher, then most likely this journal would also be indexed in good citation indexes, and as a result, I think your paper would be appearing in a good journal, and you can also refer to the impact factor.
Thank you, sir. Next is the last question. So, is there any academic advantage of reviewing IEEE access article? If yes, then how? This is the last question of the session, sir.
Okay. Well, if you have IEEE digital library access, of course, there is an academic advantage because you can access the complete IEEE digital library. If you don't have access, then you can't access. Okay. So it is very good. But what I think is that most of the Indian institutions which are part of the government system, they already have access to the IEEE digital library. So if you belong to an institution which has access, then there is no point that you subscribe separately individually, because these subscriptions are very costly. So if you are from an institution which already has access, then I think it's a good idea that you refer to, you contact your institution library and you get access. But yes, all these subscriptions are very, very useful. For example, if you have subscription to Science Direct, then you can read all papers from Elsevier. If you have subscription to Springer Link, then you can read everything from Springer. If you have access to IEEE, if you have access to ACM Digital Library, then you can access all papers that are there in these digital libraries. So it is very useful, of course.
Thank you so much, sir. A very informative and knowledgeable session for our faculty members and research scholars. You touched very nicely the main topics like performance-based funding, impact factor calculation formulas, and higher education ranking, academic social networking. These topics are much be beneficial for our faculty members. At the end of session, I would like to thank to you and thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, on his kind guidance. We are organizing this session. Our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Vineet Kansal, sir, who is motivating factor of all these activities, all these session. He separately send you a special thanks message because he is not available right now, just for his some urgent meeting. And our Dean Professor Subodh Vaidya, sir, Associate Dean Dr. Pradeep Kumar, sir, and our complete ERP team who helped us to organize this e-lecture. And thank you, sir, once again. Thanks from my side.
Thank you, Abhishek ji. It was privileged. Thank you very much. Thank you all the participants.
And for participants, this lecture is still available on YouTube, on AKTU official YouTube channel, Digital Education. In any time, anybody can access this. I have already shared the link in the chat box. You may access that. Otherwise, you may anytime on YouTube you may find this lecture. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you.